Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Monica O'Neill, and I'm the Chief of the Victim Assistance Bureau here at the Butte County District Attorney's Office. As part of National Crime Victim Rights Week, we are honored to host this recognition ceremony and welcome you all here. We have many distinguished guests here today, including Butte County Supervisor Deborah Lucero. Thank you for coming. Glenn Cordell with the California Victim Compensation Program. Garrett Scholand, our Butte County Chief of our CDF Unit Chief. Lieutenant Collins, Lieutenant Marsters from Butte County Sheriff's Office, and Sergeant McNellis from Butte County Sheriff's Office. We also have our guest speaker today, Philip Binstock, and his wife Lynn, who flew all the way from North Carolina to be with us here today. And we also have our honorees and their family and friends. There's refreshments in the hallway after the ceremony, and I'd like to invite up our most dedicated victim advocate, DA Mike Ramsey.
Thank you, Monica, and thank you all for being here. And welcome to the Butte County celebration of the National Crime Victims' Rights Week. Now, this is an opportunity for us all to reflect on and celebrate our work with crime victims. This is an opportunity that, because of COVID, remember that, was lost to us for the past 2 years. And this week is sponsored by the National Office for Victims of Crime in Washington, D.C., and the U.S. Department of Justice. Now, as indicated, this week provides that opportunity for us all as a community to raise the awareness of victims' rights and services, to highlight a very successful local program, celebrate the progress achieved, and to honor the victims and the professionals that serve them. Now, this year's theme for the National Rights Week is enforcing victims' rights, expanding access to services, and ensuring equity and inclusion for all. Now, this is a very special year for the District Attorney's Office of Butte County, because it was on January 1st, 2012, that the Butte County Probation Department transferred what was then called the Victim Witness Program to the Butte County District Attorney's Office. We have just completed our 10th year, our first decade, providing outstanding service to our local victims. Over those last 10 years, our Victim Assistance Bureau staff has offered services to over 38,059 local victims of violent crime. Our claims staff has paid out over $8,300,000 on behalf of violent crime victims through the California Victims Compensation Board. And we have Glenn here today to help us out, and he brought an extra $1 million. Is that correct? Thank you. And now the board, and Glenn personally, collects fines from the offenders convicted in criminal cases and uses this for the restitution fund to help victims. Now, as the trial attorneys, the prosecutors in our office know all too well, we rely heavily on our victim assistance staff to offer all available services to our violent crime victims. Now, this is particularly important in cases where the victims are especially vulnerable. Example, minor victims, or victims that have suffered physical or emotional injuries, or victims of corporately caused reckless arsons, i.e. the campfire. I was supposed to go that way, this way, no, this way. He's almost right. It's working really well. There we go. Okay, so you do it now. All right. Magic finger. Here we go. Ready? Thank you. For my next trick. Okay. Who can forget the campfire? And Chris. Just worked earlier. "84 souls were lost in that criminal act. That began morning of November 8th. November 8th, the captain that was at Jarbo Gap Station heard what he thought when he got up to do the fix breakfast for his Jarbo Gap crew, thought was rain. But it turned out to be the pine needles that were being forcibly thrown onto the station's roof. When he went out to check to see if it was rain, the door, when he opened, was ripped out of his hand. He knew something bad was about to happen. And certainly, in just a few minutes, the plectron, the radio, indicated report up canyon, report up towards the Poe Dam. There's something bad. Looked like it was happening. The CAL FIRE crew rolled up. They got up there. They saw the beginnings of the fire as it started to boom on the ridge top across the river from where they were. The sight sent a chill through the fire captain because he could see that it was already exploding towards the south and the west, running on the Jarbo winds, which were so high that captain was struggling to remain upright. He radioed to the headquarters with an urgency in his voice that his crew would never be able to get in the front of this fire to control it. And in a rather prophetic understatement, he told dispatchers, This has the potential of a major incident. And in less than an hour, the fire torn through Polga, the mountain hamlet of Concow, and it reached the eastern outskirts of Paradise, throwing softball-sized embers ahead into Magalia and over the town of Paradise into the Butte Creek Canyon on the west side. Paradise and its residents were hit from three sides by massive walls of fire. Chaos, confusion reigned. Thousands of homes and businesses were lost in a matter of hours. A town of some 26,000 people was utterly destroyed, and 84 souls were lost in the most horrific way imaginable, burned to death. Within a few hours of the fire, the Cal Fire lead arson investigator, Captain Tom Kluge, began to make his way to where the responding captain had seen the start of the fire. Started his investigation immediately and saw that PG&E transmission tower 27/222, number that would be burned into the prosecution team's memory for all time, showed clear signs that that was the beginning of the fire. Something had broken, and what had broken was a C hook about this size of my hand, that had been swinging in the wind for almost 100 years, neglected by the company that was in charge of making sure that that was maintained. And it wasn't. And it broke. 115,000 volts of electricity were then surged through the steel tower. The aluminum power line and the steel tower began to melt and showered sparks down onto the dry tinder and now wind-driven fuel below that tower. Cal Fire began that initial investigation, and that next day reached out to the district attorney's office on November 9th and discussed their initial findings with our office, including concern that they'd seen a PG&E helicopter hovering in the area. Well, we've had past dealings with PG&E and its criminal violations for failing to clear vegetation and other matters that caused and sparked fires. We also knew, because that PG&E was a federal felon because of its actions leading to the San Bruno gas line explosion. Directive was given to Cal Fire, folks on the ground, that we were starting a joint investigation with them. And we, the district attorney's office and Cal Fire, then started in earnest that investigation, which included making sure that area around 27/222 tower was treated as a crime scene, and everyone, including PG&E, was excluded. As the investigation continued with help from various partners, including FBI forensic teams, we decided that it was important to convene a grand jury, a special secret investigative grand jury. 19 ordinary souls were selected among Butte County citizens, brought in, and for the next year, from March of 2019 to March of 2020, heard over 100 witnesses, 1,600 exhibits, miles and miles of transcripts were produced. We learned a new term during this investigation. As the prosecutors, we were used to doing complex murder cases in which we talked about having to look at reams of evidence. So old school. Now we were talking about terabytes of data. And that's scary, folks. But we did it. We did it with an extraordinary team that will be introduced to you today. In that grand jury, after having heard all of the evidence, on St. Patrick's Day, March 17th, 2020, returned an indictment of 1 felony count of reckless arson and 84 counts of manslaughter. Attached to each of those 84 counts of manslaughter was a name, a Butte County resident, a resident in that area. PG&E, who had been represented by a battalion of criminal defense attorneys during the investigation and the grand jury proceedings, was informed of the indictment, and they said, we are going to plead guilty as charged, thereby agreeing the evidence of its criminal negligence had been established beyond a reasonable doubt. And on June 20th, 2020, the PG&E CEO, Bill Johnson, stood in court and pled guilty to a felony count of reckless arson, and then turned to a giant screen that was in the courtroom. And I'll look to Chris because I don't trust my finger. Here we go. And on that giant screen in the courtroom was the 84 victims. And as the judge read off each of the 84 manslaughter counts and read the name of that victim, that CEO turned, looked at that victim, that specific victim that came out of this collage, and pronounced the word guilty 84 times. And then after that, over the next few days, as our criminal justice system allows and demands, the next of kin and representatives of those deceased campfire victims were allowed to speak to the judge and PG&E prior to the corporation sentencing. One of the more powerful statements was made by Philip Binstock, son of 88-year-old Julian Binstock, a victim of the campfire. And we are honored today to invite Julian's son, Philip, as our guest speaker. We hear for Philip, please.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here today. It's my honor and my privilege, and I thank you. On November 8th, 2018, PG&E killed my dad in the campfire. When Jen Celentano, one of the coroner's office, found my dad, his extremities had been burned. And yet, in spite of that, she found his wedding band. I went to the sheriff's office and Jen told me that there was an inscription, but no one could read it. Well, my dad had worn the ring for 65 years, and the inscription was in French, "Toi pour toujours," telling my mother, "It's you forever." I kept the ring, and when I proposed to Lynn, the love of my life, I asked whether she would mind if I wore this as my wedding band. And Lynn said it would mean a great deal to her if I did. Look, Jen, this is our ring. That's all that is left from my dad's house. And you saved it. Thank you so very much. Sometimes disaster and fear bring out the worst in people. but they can also bring out the very best. And we certainly saw that in November of 2018. This disaster brought out your extraordinary strengths. You chose duty, courage, steadfastness, and teamwork to save strangers. With superhuman mettle, grit, and determination, you repeatedly risked your lives under the most hellish conditions. And for days, with almost no sleep or food, you fought and fought and fought to save strangers as if they were your dearest family. You evacuated people, many of whom were disabled. Paradise was a retirement community, as well as their pets. On the first day of this cataclysm, you evacuated 46,000 people down 2 lanes of Skyway. All of you supported each other collectively, both initially and continuingly. You saved and protected lives. You are heroes, giants, and angels among us. And after you vanquished the inferno, Mr. Ramsey and all of his staff jumped into the fray. Mr. Ramsey, you and your staff succeeded to the greatest extent imaginable in convicting PG&E for its great many crimes. You all exposed PG&E for the evil entity it is and punished it as much as the law allowed. You are heroes, giants, and angels among us. A very important unit of the District Attorney's Office, the Victims Assistance Unit, deals with victims of crime, guiding them to agencies that can help them, listening to them cry in anger, in agony, and grief, helping them to compose their victim statements, and helping to fix their lives and regain a purpose. I saw your love, compassion, caring, kindness, and support. You were always available to me when I called, when I showed up unexpectedly. You helped me so much, particularly with the closure and the solace as I mourned my dad. When you contacted me about giving a victim statement, and you supported me as if I was your only priority. You so positively affected my life that I'm trying to join the sheriff's office where I live now in North Carolina as a volunteer in the Victims Assistance Unit. Daily, you deal with people at their lowest. You bear the crushing and emotional burden toll of your work, and you do this endlessly. Despite your personal issues, you restore people, turning victims into victors. You may never know how many people's lives you've restored. You are heroes, giants, and angels among us. And I daily thank God for all of you, that people like you have ever lived. I daily ask God to keep you safe, healthy, and whole, to strengthen you against the wickedness and suffering with which you deal, and to guide your decisions and actions that they may be correct and righteous, and that society views them as such. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called children of God. And greater love have no people than they that would lay down their lives for others. And that describes all of you. Law enforcement, victims assistance, dispatchers, firefighters, frontline medical staff, first responders, support staff, and so many others. You have proven yourselves heroes, angels, and giants among us. And never before in such a conflagration was so much owed to so few by so many. It really is true that you heroes, angels, and giants among us do not wear capes. You wear business attire, uniforms, protective gear, and often very heavy equipment. You also wear righteousness, strength, courage, resolve, and humility. I say humility because every time I wanted to thank somebody for having done something heroic, each of them said, I was just doing my job. You inspire righteousness and you restore faith in humanity. Be well and be well blessed. And may God bless all of you heroes, angels, and giants among us. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip.
Thanks.
The grief endured by Philip and so many others, some of who are in this room, who lost loved ones during the fire, cannot be overstated. And I express to you and to your wife, Lynn, our deepest condolences. And I thank you for coming all this way and sharing your story with us. And you've become a bit of our auxiliary force in the Carolinas. And I'd like, if you would, step back on up here. And Lynn, would you do us the honor of pinning this? Probably if you get it right in the tie there. This is a Butte County District Attorney's pin, the bell pin or tie pin, tie tack. And so this officially makes you our auxiliary
East Coast branch.
member. And I'd also like to give to you both here. This is our challenge coin. And on one side, Lady Liberty with Butte County District Attorney. And on the other side is our kind of watchwords, Veritas and Equitas. Truth, justice, sir. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So obviously, very true. What Phil said, disaster and fear can be strange things. And as he's indicated, it's impossible to mention all the agencies, medical providers, fire personnel, law enforcement, community groups, churches, leaders, and individuals who rose up to help and provide aid and support for our campfire victims. And as we know, in Butte County, there is BC before campfire and AC after campfire. That's how we do the time at this point. But today, we're going to recognize a few of the folks that fought the good fight, fought the fight to bring justice to the folks that were our 84 victims. And I want to start with the first person that was up there and started that investigation that, as we've indicated, turned out successful. The largest criminal prosecution in terms of manslaughter charges against a corporation in U.S. history. Prosecutors rule, number one, you cannot have a successful prosecution without a thorough investigation. And that started with CAL FIRE Captain Tom Kluge. Tom could not be here today, nonetheless was up there, and as the fire was still raging, he was conducting, along with his team, a meticulous and thorough investigation. Figuring out how the fire started was easy, but as those that know arson cases, eliminating every other possible ignition source. Wild rats carrying matchsticks in their teeth. That's actually been a defense in one arson case. Bottles that act like magnets, or rather magnifying glasses, and start fires, or just the rustling of static electricity. All of that had to be eliminated. Tom and his team used metal detectors and traversed the rugged, and I mean very rugged, terrain surrounding the PG&E's equipment up there, using a grid system so they would not and could not miss any piece of evidence. They literally turned over every rock in that area looking for evidence. And for Tom's unwavering dedication to those who perished and to those who had suffered, I'm honored to present to his unit chief, Garrett Sholin, the Outstanding Victim Advocacy Award for this year. Garrett? Sir? We'll have that, and he'll change that so that people can see us. And this is for Tom, and if you want to say.
Absolutely. As Mr. Ramsey stated, Fire Captain Kluge wasn't able to make it here today. He's on another assignment. But as stated, him and the entire investigation that was conducted by our Fire Prevention Bureau, we were extremely proud of the folks that were involved with that. We're really fortunate to have that team in place, and the knowledge and skills that they had over the years of coming up through the ranks as a firefighter to that position. All of our investigators are firefighters at one point or another in the field, so they understand the complexities of that. So therefore, we're able to engage quickly. And I'm really proud of Tom and his willingness to not only do this as part of the job that needed to get done, but really to take the time out of his personal life and see that it was done correctly. So I'll make sure that he gets this, and thank you all.
Thank you. Now, I'm going to ask some folks to come up, and these would be our DA investigators that were in it to win it from the beginning. And so Nick Moore, District Attorney Investigator Nick Moore, and District Attorney Investigative Lieutenant Jason Barkley. If you could step on up here. Start with DA Investigator Nick Moore. As indicates, one of our in-house DA investigators. He was part of the initial response to the town of Paradise. Because when, as Sheriff Honey likes to say, when the big red handle was pulled, all law enforcement in basically Northern California responded, and our local folks, our local DA investigators, full peace officers responded up there. Nick helped organize the evacuation of middle and elementary schools in the Paradise area. And Nick assisted with the recovery efforts to locate missing and deceased members of the community. And as part of the investigation, he conducted numerous interviews with PG&E employees. He coordinated a multi-agency collection of the evidence, bringing in our friends from the FBI forensic labs. Side note, as we were going on and this investigation, and the PG&E attorneys knew that we're doing the investigation, one called me, thought that we were just gathering the evidence for a civil investigation. And when I told him, oh yeah, we're going to be collecting the evidence up there. Oh, okay, so are you going to be sending it to one of the civil engineering firms? I said, no, we're sending it to a small firm in Quantico, Virginia. He says, well, what's the name of that? It's called the Federal Bureau of Investigation. On the other end of the line, there was an audible gasp as PG&E then started realizing this was no civil investigation. This was criminal. And Nick was part of that help for us. So Nick, let me give you the Outstanding Victim Advocate Award. Very much appreciate it. The DA investigator, also Doug Patterson, who could not be here, also one of our in-house DA investigators assigned to the Campfire prosecution team. And Doug cannot be here today because he's at Stanford Medical Center dealing with, and I can't pronounce it, it's larynx cancer. Something his doctors attribute, at least in part, to the smoke and carcinogens that he was exposed to in the campfire. Doug, but he has a very good prognosis. But it's those victims like Doug and others that suffer and sometimes suffer in silence that this prosecution team was out to find justice for. Doug helped conduct the thorough inspection of the Caribou Palermo 115,000 volt line using the sheriff's office helicopter. And it showed that the PG&E, when they performed their aerial inspections, it was essentially a flyby, too fast, too high, in order to save time and money. And as a result, they missed the component and components that were about to fail in other transmission towers. So Nick, I'm going to have you accept the award. For the... Thank you, sir. And DA Investigative Lieutenant Jason Barkley. He runs right now our fraud division. And kind of the fraud division with PG&E, it's a natural fit. And Jason, at the very beginning, assisted with the evacuations in the fire areas, and later assisted the coroner teams in finding and recovering the remains. Jason was also responsible for accumulating the key evidence of what we call proof of life of our deceased victims. We couldn't just assume that the fire had caused this particular death. We had to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the person just hadn't died ahead of time and then been burnt. It's awful work, but it was important in that grand jury investigation to show that. It meant listening to radio traffic and absolutely harrowing 911 calls to establish that our victims were alive just prior to the fire. He testified before the grand jury and assisted the prosecution team at all of the subsequent hearings, and including the court hearings. And Jason? For you, sir. Another plaque to add to the many that you've done. Okay, we get now to prosecutor rule number 2. You can't have a successful prosecution unless your evidence is organized. And if you've seen the desks of our prosecutors, Mr. Noel, Ms. Dupre-Tokus, and the worst of all, my own, you will understand why we needed to get that organization. So we needed a crew to help us with that. And I'm going to, at this point, call up Jacob McKill and Noel Francis, and also Sheriff's Coroner's Investigator Jennifer Celentano. Jacob here is a paralegal and a law student. Be frightened. Be very frightened. He is taking the bar this summer.
Not quite the summer.
Well, the next summer. Okay, that's right. It's next summer. This is how time flies. But he, and we have no doubt that it will be successful. If I could pass it, he certainly can pass it. He provided the legal research and organizational skills that kept the team on track. He prepared daily summaries of that year-long grand jury testimony, highlighting the key evidence for the prosecutors. And Jacob's patience and perseverance kept the team moving forward. So, Jacob? Sir? Thank you, sir. Congratulations. And DA crime analyst, Noel Francis. Noel was tasked to gather and organize the evidence from all the 911 calls to assist Jason Barkley in doing that. She was also at the same time volunteering with Butte County Search and Rescue and has been for the past 9 years with her dog Spinner. She and Spinner spent a month combing through the ashes, searching for remains, and clearing what was once people's homes. Noah will tell you, as she has told us, is one of the hardest, emotionally draining work she has ever done. But she did it as a true professional and someone that we are extraordinarily proud of. And Sheriff's Coroner Investigator Jennifer Celentano, or as I called her the entire time, Celestano, after the pizza place. And she's used to that. It's interestingly enough, that's the pizza place I met my daughter, who fled along with the 4 grandchildren, actually 5. She was 7 months pregnant. Fled down from Paradise to meet at a safe location at that pizza place in Orville. She was the coroner's investigator who was assigned to collect the remains of deceased victims for the first 2 weeks of the fire, as well as the information on next of kin. She collected the remains of the first 5 victims of the campfire while the fire was actually still burning. She worked directly with the Andy Rapid DNA system for identifying the remains on the case, a system that our sheriff got so that we could have rapid turnaround within 2 hours of identification of remains, as opposed to going with Department of Justice rather long way, which would have been months, not even days. And she worked closely with the families, including Philip's family. And as Philip's already indicated, she was the one that found Julian's Binstock's wedding ring and returned it. She testified before the grand jury 85 times. Once for each victim, and then overall for the fact of the arson. And Jennifer also attended the PG&E sentencing hearings on June 20th, 2020, to support the victims' families who gave their victim impact statements. So we're very proud to have worked with Jennifer on this. Oh, that's it. Noel, you're going to remain. Noel's going to remain because there's another member of the team that could not be here today, and that's Investigative Assistant Roxanne Wells. As an investigative assistant that was assigned to the team, and she was responsible for maintaining the organization of all of those terabytes of data. This included the recordings, media in the sense of photos, videos, so forth, maps, documents, and witness statements. And she kept the data up to date and organized the documents to be used with the grand jury, helping keep the prosecution moving forward seamlessly and keeping all that in one place until Mark Noel accidentally deleted it. He really didn't, but it's gone someplace. So if you would, for Roxanne. Very much appreciated. Okay, prosecutor rule number 3. You cannot have a successful prosecution without excellent prosecutors, and we had the best. Start with supervising Deputy District Attorney Jennifer Dupre Tokas. In, don't disturb. Oh, geez, yeah, that'd be great. Boom, boom.
It'd be suitable to trip over that.
Jennifer was the prosecutor who delivered the death evidence for the 84 victims of the Camp Fire to the grand jury. Now, this was a daunting task because she had to learn the details of how each person died and where they were found. She communicated with many of the families and was exposed to the unbearable grief that they were experiencing. And despite the weight of that pain and the horror she heard, she showed the utmost respect for these victims and their families, and by bringing some justice to them, continued to help motivate her as well as the rest of the team. And her cool head and prosecutorial sensibilities kept the prosecution on the rails to justice. And her legal writing was exceptional and continues to today. Because just as we say that campfire is the gift that keeps on giving, she is our lead prosecutor in opposing PG&E's most current appeal to the California Supreme Court, brief due today. So Jennifer, Mark, and myself were working through the weekend, getting that brief ready for PG&E's attempt to keep the grand jury transcripts secret with the names of their PG&E employees that were responsible. We fought them in the, going to sound like Churchill. We fought them at our trial court, won. We fought them at the appellate court, Sacramento 3rd District Court of Appeal down in Sacramento, and won. And now they're appealing to the California Supreme Court. And so we've spent a great deal of effort and to make that final push, that final line to try and keep Goliath down. And so that's what's happening at this point. She was also very important in keeping Mark under control. See, this is a Mark bashing, and I love that. Right? But Jennifer? Thank you. And does anyone live in Sutter County? No. Okay. There is a district attorney election coming up in June in Sutter County. You will see 2 names on that ballot. This is the best one. Mark Noel, Senior Supervising Deputy District Attorney. Would you step on up? Mark was the lead prosecutor on this case. Mark lived and breathed PG&E for about some 18 months and continuing to today. He'll be the first to tell you that he was only able to manage the work here because everyone else in the office, other people, had to step up and take the work of the team, the folks that you have seen here, have to take this. This is not an office in which we could fully dedicate a person or even two to a case. Mark continued to have to deal with the ordinary murders and other cases that were coming in, but as much as we could relieve Mark on that, and the DAs that were in the office taking up those cases, Chief Deputy Mark Murphy helping and actually taking those cases on himself, as well as innumerable other folks. Mark had to have the time to accumulate the massive collection of evidence and synthesize it down to a manageable level and apply the facts to the law before the grand jury. He spent countless hours organizing, then presenting the evidence to the grand jury. As I said, he lived, breathed, and dreamed about PG&E. And the facts and the law as presented by Mark and Jennifer and the teams as a whole made it so that justice was done. We've likened it to the fight from David and Goliath. And this hardworking team of DA fighters fought against a massive PG&E Goliath, bringing victims and their families some degree of justice. I want to thank you, Mark. No, you know, we're trying to keep it on time. Okay, we'll change this slide. Now, here in Butte County, we have the, as I indicated, everyone has a campfire story. And because basically campfire changed everything. It changed everything for the families who grieve the loss of their loved ones, and changed everyone who lost their homes, their jobs, their sense of community. Well, mostly, it also impacted the children. Families were displaced, schools were destroyed. Then, just 18 months after the fire, and interestingly enough, just 2 days after the indictment was released, we went into COVID lockdown. That forced the closures of businesses, schools, bringing more turmoil and tragedy. We worried, as did teachers, school officials, and social workers, that the situation could result in more crimes against children. And we were right to worry. Child molestation cases were on the rise. And one of the folks that helped in that area, Sheriff's Detective Mary Barker, was there. Mary, come on up. Now, Mary is a detective with the Butte County Sheriff's Office. Detective Barker has investigated and followed the successful prosecution of 4, in a particular case, co-defendants who were abusing 5 children. Children's mother was allowing her 3 of her 5 children to be molested in exchange for housing. Children were 9, 7, and 4. Both the parents placed the children in deplorable conditions, risking their physical and mental health. And Detective Barker conducted a probation search on one of the suspected molesters, and through her stick-to-itiveness, broke the case open. All 5 of the children were removed from the parents and placed in a safe location. And once secure, the children were able to fully disclose the horror of what was happening to them. Employing her excellent interview skills, Detective Barker obtained confessions from all co-defendants. 3 of the 4 defendants pled out, but one decided to roll the dice and go to trial. Detective Barker built rapport and continued to support the children throughout the trial. All the children, but in particular the 7-year-old, developed a special bond with Detective Barker. It was through her and her relationship of trust that the children felt safe enough to be able to actually testify in court and face the molester. A fear-inducing experience for most adults. As a result of her work, all 4 defendants were convicted and sentenced. The one that went to trial received 125 years to life when he was sentenced. Bad role. Detective Barker went above and beyond in protecting the victims' rights. She made sure our victims received justice for the actions of the 4 different defendants. So for your steadfast commitment to protecting the citizens of Butte County, I present you with our outstanding victim advocate. Go to the next slide. Okay, as Philip indicated, there are angels among us, or maybe angles among us, and I'm going to ask Sheila Engel to come on up. Sheila, thank you for being here. A little bit about Sheila. She, some months ago, reached out to our Victim Assistance Bureau, and she had heard about the increase in children and victims that we were having and being victimized, and she wanted to do something to help. So she offered to collect toys and games and dolls from the community during the Christmas season to donate to our child victims. She started to deliver those craft games, puppets, snacks, things that would keep the children busy and nourished while they waited to be either interviewed or to testify. And in December of 2021, Sheila delivered 317 toys and games for her victims, toys suitable for children of all ages, and infants through teens. And Sheila, we want to thank you for your generosity and the loving support of the children who are the victims of crime, and also in keeping a certain retired district attorney investigator on the straight and narrow, your husband, John. So we honor your work with our Outstanding Victim Advocate Award. Okay, final prosecutor rule. Don't follow the dog act. Be the dog act. If you can close with the dog, do it. I'd like to introduce you to Reuben and James Kassner. Well, many of us have dogs at home. How many of us can say that dog receives at least 2,000 hours of training and gets deployed to the worst kinds of situations? That's the work that Reuben and his 9 handlers do. They get deployed to disaster events like the campfire and spend their time providing comfort and care to those suffering pain or loss. They go wherever they are invited as part of the Lutheran Church Charities Canine Ministries. The LCC specifically uses golden retrievers, as they are known as being social, gentle, and loving dogs, and have proven effective in working in situations where it requires a bit of the softer touch. James Kassner is considered the top dog. He is the primary care home for Reuben and is the one that drives the van. You may see it outside with Reuben's face on it. He and his team worked for 2 years to get Reuben and are proud to say that Reuben is tri-vested. That means he has a vest for when he's a comfort dog, a vest for when he works with the police, and a vest when he works with the military, known as Care 9. Reuben and James have become fixtures within our Butte County Victim Assistance Bureau, as they're often called upon to assist our advocates in giving that extra encouragement and compassion to those who need it. In fact, Reuben and James, as well as another comfort dog, Micah, were asked to provide comfort and safety to the same victims with in that case that Detective Barker worked. Reuben and Micah sat at the feet of our young victims while they testified, hidden behind the witness stand. Show that up. And there's one of our victims there. And so the little dog, big dog, is there. And then the jurors never knew the dogs were there because they were settled out of sight before the jurors were brought into the courtroom. I'd asked and been rejected to have the dog sitting out in front of the witness stand, slowly growling at the defendant, but that seemed to be prejudicial. So they're behind the scenes. Just having them at the victim's feet and the victims being able to pet and be comforted while they face a big group of strangers, the jurors and all the court personnel and the attorneys, had a remarkable effect on our victims. Their physical and emotional anxiety was lessened, and they know that when it's over with, they have a friend who will simply be, just be, and provide a little golden glitter. That's golden retriever for those not in the know. Reuben and James, we thank you for all that you have done for our victims. Very much appreciate it. There you go. Oh, yeah. Oh, that's right. You had to get some.
Reuben, this is from all of us in Victim Assistance. We have a nice basket of balls for you. So you have lots of treats for you, sweetheart.
A little sniff.
Yeah, a little sniff and a little buddy.
Oh, yeah, I like that. Oh, can I have that? Can I have that? All right, thank you. Well, it's been too long since we had a chance to get together and recognize the great work that Butte County is able to do. And just as a kind of a perspective for, I used to say over the years, but over the decades now, that we've noted in Butte County is the fact, in talking to other district attorneys' offices and other governmental offices in other counties, we are extraordinarily blessed with great people. And we aren't so small that we have no resources, but we aren't so large that we don't know each other and are able to collaborate and work with each other for the betterment of the community. And that's what we do when we help our crime victims. So I want to thank each and every one of you for looking up to that ideal of helping out those folks that are unfortunate victims of crime and making this a better community. Thank you all for being here.